on this, we are joined by US political commentator Calvin Dark in Washington, D.C. Calvin, we're so appreciative of your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Good to be here.
I was looking at the list of school shootings over the last 20 or so years, and it makes for really grim reading. Virginia Tech in 2007, 33 people dead. Sandy Hook Primary in 2012, 28 people dead. Stoneman Douglas High School in 2018, 17 people dead. This has been a hot button issue for a long time in your country, Calvin.
Yes, it has. And as you were reciting those dates, I was going through my mind remembering where I was when each of those things happened. It's a horrible circumstance that we've been dealing with far too long here in the United States.
What is the main issue at play here? Why have we not seen any meaningful change so far, given the long list of incidents of school shootings?
Well, I think that there are two reasons that make the United States story unfortunately unique. The first is that the right to bear arms is enshrined in our Constitution. Now, I don't agree with all the ways that has been interpreted, but that is one of the effects. Also, we have a very loud and effective gun rights lobby here in the United States that has intimidated so many of our lawmakers. So when you put those two things together, that explains why we have not made changes as other countries have done, New Zealand included, when we've had these mass shootings and horrible events.
I was looking at some of that money that's been spent. In 2020, the NRA spent $2.2 million to benefit the political campaigns of senators who oppose gun safety legislation. So is that a big part of it? Does it just come down to money, Calvin?
It's a lot more than money, because even when you look at the statistics, when you think about the fact that any presidential candidate has to spend more than $1 billion in an election, $2 million, that's a drop in the bucket. It's not just the actual money spent lobbying, it's the kind of cultural revitalization that the NRA, the National Rifle Association, does in all of these districts, where they basically intimidate people who are running, not just for national offices, but even for state level offices. They're not going to oppose anything that would, they're not going to go for anything that would infringe on what they believe is Americans' rights to guns. So it goes a lot farther than money.
And it's tough, right? Because I think about President Obama after Sandy Hook, and he said, we won't be able to stop every violent act, but if there is one thing that we can do to prevent any of these events, we have a deep obligation, all of us, to try. And yet even the President of the United States couldn't enact any kind of major change after that event. Why is that? What's stopping him or the President from making any kind of massive change here?
There are two reasons for that. One is what I mentioned with just the culture of gun ownership in this country and the protections that a lot of people feel are in the Constitution, but also that in this country, to make realistic changes to laws, it goes far beyond the president. You know, we have a lot of issues here in this country with, racism, hate crimes, gun violence. Sometimes that comes together. But if you think about Sandy Hook in the example that you mentioned with former President Obama, this was in Connecticut. This was, predominantly white kindergartners and first graders, over 20 of them killed. And if that doesn't mobilize this country to change the gun laws, then as President Obama effectively said, what would? So I think that it points to Congress, because in this country, to really do something to change something for the long term, particularly with guns, it's not just the president, but it takes our Congress, which is incredibly divided.
Although now there is this new agreement that has been proposed. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what is being proposed here?
Yes. Now, I just want to, first of all, caution everyone that this is a framework kind of understanding. And while I like to be optimistic, the United States Congress is famous for proposing frameworks and propositions that never become things that lawmakers can vote on, much less that become law. But if you do take, the bipartisan group of senators' word for it, that these are the things they're portraying, I think it's less reforms, but more tinkering around the edges. That's to say that when we talk about the enhanced background checks, well, that's just for 18 to 21, which that will definitely address some issues, but it doesn't stop anyone under 21 from purchasing some of these weapons, or anyone else over 21. There are these incentives for red flag laws, which basically where you can, if you report to police that there's someone with an issue and that if they have a gun, they can take it away. It's just incentives. So if states don't want to enact it, they don't have to. It's just trying to incentivize them to do it. I will say that there are two things that I do think are positive. One is the extra funding for mental health care in this country, which is needed, and for school safety, although I hope that doesn't become just an avenue to turn our schools into prisons and airports. The second is to close the boyfriend loophole, which before there were ways that you could have a gun taken away from someone if they were a spouse, domestic partner, an ex-spouse, for example, that didn't include boyfriends and girlfriends. This now would include that if this becomes law. So it's tinkering around the edges, and most of it is, I think, basically for show, but I do think there are parts of it that can eventually help.
It's hard though, right? Because it's modest change, but it's something where we haven't seen any kind of suggestions so far. So it's tough to know whether this is the thing that you agree to and then hope possibly lose any momentum moving forward, or do you push harder to enact any real change? What do you think will happen there, Kelvin?
I think the word momentum you used is key because we have to look at the timing. One, this is a midterm election year. And just on that point, I want to say that, a lot has been made about the fact that there are 10 Republicans that have signaled they would support this legislation if it reflects the framework they agree to. That would be the 10 needed in the United States system to get over the filibuster of 60 votes. Here's the thing. None of those 10 are up for election this year. 4 of them, I believe, are retiring, so they never have to face voters as a senator. So that shows you this is no profile in courage. These are the 10 Republicans that don't have anything to lose. But now, when it comes to, as you mentioned, great change, overcoming, I think that it's possible in increments, but we're once again in an election year where if we're talking about that momentum, if this does not happen by the 4th of July, American Independence Day, it's very doubtful that it will. Because after the 4th of July, these members of Congress go back to their districts where they hear from their constituents who are going to express yay or nay for this, and then we're in the election season. And I can tell you as an American in Washington, D.C., it is extremely hard to do anything consequential after the summer in a midterm election year. So we have that to fight against for the momentum to get this framework into law.
Kelvin, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We really appreciate your time and your insight this morning. That's Kelvin Darker, US political commentator. We'll check back in with you hopefully before July.
Thank you.